is going to give us a detailed and informative session on how we can access general dental practice in United States of America and Canada, basically the northern North America continent. And one thing I want to tell you all is to get your pen, get your jotter, because you're going to jot things down. And I do not want you to be distracted by anything around you. Focus on the program because we are also going to entertain questions at the end of the series. I believe everyone is ready. Yeah, it's 5:02. So now, before I hand over the mic to our speaker, I would like to introduce our speaker and read out his profile here. Our speaker for this evening is Dr. Akintayo Oguji. Dr. Akintayo Ogunji completed his Bachelor of Dental Surgery (BDS) at the University of Lagos, Nigeria in 2012. During his time there, he held various leadership roles in student organizations such as editor-in-chief of the Writers Club and general secretary of the University of Lagos Association of Dental Students. And in 2011, he served as president of ULADS and vice president of Nigeria Association of Dental Students. Wow. His passion for research led him to present a poster on the prevalence of tooth-wear lesions at the 2013 FDI World Congress in Istanbul, Turkey, where it was recognized as one of the top three in the restorative category. Seeking to broaden his understanding of dental practices in different cultures, he undertook a clinical elective at King's College London in 2012, sparkling his interest in practicing dentistry beyond Nigeria. And in 2019, he relocated to Canada and worked as a dental assistant in Vancouver, British Columbia, for 2 years before pursuing a DDS, Doctor of Dental Surgery degree at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA. Following his graduation, he aims to fulfill his aspiration of becoming a general slash cosmetic dentist, dedicated to his motto of changing the world one smile at a time. Dr. Gunji is happily married and proud father to a daughter. And without further ado, I would like to hand over the mic to Dr. Okayode Ogunji. Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Dr. Akintayo.
Good evening.
All right, sir. I'm handing the mic over to you now, sir, to take over.
Okay, give me 1 second here.
All right, sir.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir. We can hear you, sir.
Okay, just trying to figure out my camera here. Give me 1 second. I got it. Okay. I think I got it. Hmm. Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir.
So, I think first of all, I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So, um, it'll be brief as I can, and we'll kind of like make sure the room is open for questions as much as possible. Sorry, I was in a couple minutes late. We're just trying to figure out what is computer savviness, which I'm still kind of like working on. Um, so good evening once again, everybody. My name is Tayo Gunji, and I am thrilled, excited to be here in your midst today. I think this is the first time since I probably left the College of Medicine, that I'm back in some capacity to do a talk or something. So I'm thrilled and happy that we are able to have this conversation together, and hopefully we can learn one or two things today, and then we can take that from there, and hopefully that can inspire one or two people to you know pursue their dreams wherever it may be it in Nigeria, in Canada, in the US, or wherever that place might be. um, that said, um, the topic for today is supposed to be general practice in the USA and Canada. And before today, your president had sent me some questions that had come up from the Google Forms. So I try to kind of like pivot a little bit to see if I can answer some of those questions in the presentation. And then at the end of it, if we have any more questions, we can always just kind of like, piggyback and, answer those questions, whatever they might be. Like I said, I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So if while during the presentation, if you do have a question or a contribution you want to make, or feel free to raise the hand up, stop me somewhere in between, and kind of like let's get those answers for you as soon as we can. So I do have a presentation, just trying to push that up here. 1 second here. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen now?
Yes, sir. We can see your screen.
Okay, great. So first off, like I said, it was supposed to be general practice in US or Canada, and then I just kind of like give it a broad overview to kind of like cover some other topics so that we can, have some more knowledge about the questions that were asked in between. So first off, I always tell people that, dentistry across the world, like one question I get a lot here is people asking me, well, how different is dentistry from back home? And my default answer to them usually is teeth is teeth anywhere. It's the same 3 molars in the lower arch you're going to get, 2 premolars, 1 canine, incisors. Like no race has something different. So the beauty about it is that teeth will always be teeth. So whether you get trained in Nigeria or Saudi Arabia or anywhere in the world, doesn't really matter. You're probably going to have the same kind of like knowledge being passed across. I think for me, the big changes or the things that I saw that were different would be in terms of equipment. Like I know, before I left Nigeria, I didn't see a ceramic milling machine or a ceramic firing oven and things like that. And those are things that you would see on a regular in places like here. Like nearly every practice would have one, CBCT machines, all those kind of things that are fully functional and things like that. So I think the basic difference challenge for me, or my rude shock when I first moved over here was those kind of different activities that we didn't have back home. And in terms of like patient management, I don't know about now, but back when we were in school, we in pediatric dentistry, we used to learn about the Pappus board. Now in North America, you cannot use a Pappus board. It is outlawed. You cannot, it is almost considered trampling upon people's rights because you are tying a kid down or something. So I think the major difference is kind of like trying to figure out the location you are, the laws of the location, the management of the patients in there, associateship, litigations and all that kind of thing are the things that will be different from Nigeria. Every other thing in terms of like the actual treatment are usually the same. Same class 2, same crown prep, every other thing pretty much the same. So I think my message to you basically at the beginning is right, off the bat is that you should be confident in whatever you're doing, because what you're going to get there, if US or Canada is your final destination, would not be much different from what you've practiced back home. So don't put it to mind and say, you know what, I'm trying to go to Canada or the US. I wouldn't study dentistry right now. Focus on what I can get when I get over there, because it's almost the same thing. So the more you put into yourself right now, the more you stand in good stead when you get over there, if that's where you are planning to go. So like I said, the only thing you have to then learn will be the other laws, the ethics, regulations, and all those kind of different things. But in general, whatever you're learning back in dental school right now would not be much different from what you will learn in dental school over here, or in general practice of dentistry in the US or Canada. So talk about US or Canada. It's a beautiful country, either of them, and they are people who have put so much into their dental care. As you can see on that list we have on there, US and Canada have put so much research and put so much investment into dental care, and that has made them in the top 10 countries with the best oral health. Maybe not best oral health in terms of teeth they have or the cavities they have, but in terms of how they are visiting dentists, treating cavities when necessary, and making sure to prevent perio disease and stuff like that. So that's kind of like important. And if you see from that little statistics I have on the side there, it's not so much different from what Nigeria would have in terms of like the dentist ratio. There's always a need for dentists, be it here, be it in Nigeria, be it anywhere in the world. There's always going to be that demand for dentists. So second note is that you're in a profession that's highly lucrative and something that you're going to be in vogue, in need of. I've been having conversations recently about if AI is going to take over our jobs, and maybe that will happen in 100 years, maybe 50 years. But for the time being, I think dentistry is a profession that's going to be here for the long haul. So population sense, there's a lot more need for dentists everywhere. Just like the same in Nigeria, there's almost one dentist to 60,000 patients, which is a lot. So I guess we need to, as dentists, start figuring out the business of dentistry, how we can get those patients through the door, increasing oral health awareness, making sure people are not coming to us at the end stage when we can do for them is root canals or extraction. So those outreaches you're going for and getting that word out there is very, very important and pertinent to what is going to be beneficial for the patient and for the population, and the way to bring Nigeria to maybe one of the top 20 or top 50 countries in dental health worldwide. That said, I know because a lot of people asked about questions about how to get credentialed in the US and Canada. I just kind of like decided to divert a little bit and just kind of like do a bit of knowledge, putting knowledge out there for people who want to like apply that route basically. In the US particularly, there are kind of like different routes to which you can get licensure to practice dentistry, and more often than not, it will require you going back to school for the most part. So you can see in there, 51 states require you to have that 2 year of a DDS or a DMD program. So actually 52 states now, because California has joined that league right now. Some states would actually allow foreign trained dentists to actually practice. And the two states as of right now are Massachusetts in Boston and Minnesota. But that said, the requirements to get that limited license isn't as straightforward as it might seem. It is pretty cumbersome. And even after you get that, you are only allowed to work in specific places like prisons, like community clinics, like some low end places. They get remunerated well, so they get paid pretty well. But you also have to work under supervision for a certain amount of years before you can then apply to get your own license. But even at that, the process for itself, for getting the license itself, can be pretty tricky. And that said, for anybody who is planning to either relocate to the US, you want to make sure that you want to look at the dental state board of the state you're trying to go to or looking to move to, because most of them have different requirements as it entails what you need to be able to practice dentistry. So one size sometimes does not fit all in the US. So different states have different requirements. So it would, do you good to actually do the research and see what state has what in what terms of what you want and what you're looking to get. And so that once you get in there, you're able to like focus on what you really want to do. Some states also would allow you to go for a residency. So you can, another part where people do is to go for some residencies that are short term. So like orofacial pain, oral radiology residencies. And when you finish the residency, you can actually challenge the licensure board exam. And then if you pass those at a time, you can be licensed in certain states for a couple of years. And then after that, you can get a general license to work in any state. So the US has a lot of pathways to get into working as a dentist in the US. It's kind of like a number of them, but it kind of like depends on what you really want, and also depends on what states you actually want to go to. That actually determines what you would need. That said, as a general requirement for dental school, basically, if you decide to go back to dental school for to get your licensure in the United States, these are just the basic things you would need. There are other things that you would need, but in terms of like a general overview, this will be the main one. So basically, you're going to have to do a foreign credential evaluation in terms of like a transcript. So the transcript gets sent, and then they have to like evaluate that transcript and see what standing you are compared to your peers in the in the system that you're planning to apply to. So they also have to do a TOEFL, and by rule of thumb, a good score to have in TOEFL is 90 and above. But depending on what school you're also applying to, some schools are very specific in what section gets what, basically. So I predominantly tend to tell people that you're looking to get above 100. That's going to be somewhere to actually be in a good place to start, basically. So above 100, though most schools will say 90 and above, but I think the place you want to find yourself actually is above 100, basically. It's kind of like about 120. So about 100 isn't that hard to get, I think. Anyways, plus we're also from Nigeria. I think our English in Nigeria is also pretty good. So it's just an English test. You more often than not, people tend to crush it. So don't stress about that too. You also have to do the IMBDE, is the Integrated National Board of Dental Examination. Previously, they used to have an MBD 1 and an MBD 2. That has been phased out as of 2022. Schools are still accepting that. So if you had started that before and you had some part of that, it is still valid for a couple of years. I'm not sure exactly when it stops being valid, but I think it's 2026. But now what is happening now is people are taking the IMBDE as a reference for dental school. Now you can also take the ADAT, the Advanced Dental Admission Test. It's kind of like an admission test to get into dental school, basically, or residency programs, depending on what exactly it is. It is optional for a lot of schools. Some schools, recommend it. It's not required, but some schools just kind of like also recommend it to or require it too. So, it's something to also think about in terms of the school you want to attend. You also have to research that to see what your chances are. And of course, you want to have a letter of references. You're going to have to get one from your school's dean. So it's always good to like make sure while you're in dental school, you have like you're not that student who is being spoken of in a different light. So because ultimately you're going to need those references from back home too. They also want a CV or a resume, and it's also good. I always tell people like this is the time for you to actually get into extracurricular activities, because what I find for dental schools here is that especially for foreign trained graduates, they realize that you've been dentists before, and they understand that you can do the dentistry, but they want to see how well-rounded you are, how balanced you are, in entirety, basically. So it's not going to be only the academia they're considering. So they also want to see how how you socialize, how you go for extracurricular activities, what activities you do, so that you can be an all-round team player in their school. So this is the time to get involved with Code, to get involved with various NGOs as you can, so that you can have a more robust resume when you do that application. Also, you have application fees. So a lot of application fees, depending on what schools you're applying to. There's a lot of money involved. So that's going to be something that you keep in mind when, if and when you decide to go through dental school in the US. In Canada, it's kind of like slightly different. There's kind of like basically two pathways in Canada compared to the US. You have like multiple. I shouldn't say that. So the Canada also has multiple, but if you want to practice as a general dentist, there's predominantly two ways to get into that process. The first one is called the equivalency process, which I've outlined here. So basically, there's a credentialing process you have to do and an approval from the national body. So you have to send your transcript again, either by WES or ECE. That's going to have to get done. And then once you're approved, then you have to take the first exam. The first exam is that assessment of fundamental knowledge. It's the AFK exam. And I'm sure most of you have heard about it. But that kind of like basic sciences, basic dental knowledge. It's a tricky exam. And, the pass mark usually is 75%. So once you pass that, and then you are eligible to take the next step, which is the ACJ, clinical judgment. It's also a written exam. It consists of 2 books, about 150 questions, I think. And, it's kind of like situational judgment, basically. They kind of like give you x-rays and interpret x-rays. Where's the calculus here? Where's the caries here? What's the bone loss percentage? What's the perio classification? Things like that. Basically, that's what they're trying to like see. So, your dental school knowledge actually, will come in really handy for those kind of things. As a digression, I remember, like, I finished school in CMUL in 2012. So I remember when I got into school here, it was kind of like weird because apparently when I was in school back then, we had the classification for perio, and it was kind of like aggressive periodontitis, juvenile periodontitis, and the likes. And I got into dental school here, and in 2017, there was a new classification. I'm like, oh no. So I had to learn a new classification all over again, where you're doing stage 1, stage 2, grading and staging. Things are always going to change over time, but I think right now you guys are in that phase where your knowledge is actually at par with what is actually being taught worldwide, basically. And that said, after the ACG exam, you have the NDECC exam, which is kind of like a clinical exam. You're working on mannequins, and they're giving you some practices you have to do, like bench tests, like tests you have to do. So there's kind of like cavity preparations, class 2s, there's crown preps to do. And so all those things you did in junior op tech is very important, because you're going to have work on phantom heads again. You're going to have to cut those cavities, cut those crowns, ceramic crowns, porcelain fused to metal crowns, cavity prep, dovetailing, all those kind of things, retention form, convenience form. Everything you've learned is not something you should just like say, oh, I'm done with op tech, let it go. It's going to be something that you're going to need over time. And also, when you get into practice, also is something you're going to keep doing, because they will say that the bread and butter of dentistry here in North America is your cavity prep. So you want to make sure you're doing cavity for people, or fillings for people that would last the long haul. Make sure you have good retention, because it's just the same way in Nigeria. You do a filling for somebody, and after 2 weeks it falls off. It's not coming back to you. It's going somewhere else, and that person is going to leave a review and say, I did a filling here, and after 2 weeks it came off, blah, blah, blah. So you want to make sure that all those things you learned in dental school, or you're learning in dental school right now, is something you're definitely going to keep in mind, because that actually is the bread and butter of a general dentist, even here in North America too. So it's very important for you to keep that in mind, keep practicing. Practice makes perfect. So, it won't happen in one day, but the more you do, so don't shy away. If the school requires you to do only 5, and you do 5, and you have opportunities to do 20, do 20, because that's the only way you can get better, basically. And, just saying, I remember during my house job days too, I remember we were required to do like maybe 3 root canals. I probably ended up doing about 20. So I know when I got out into practice there in Nigeria too, because a lot of people would send their patients to me, because I was comfortable doing, molar endo, anterior endo, any kind of endo. I was kind of like doing everything. So always look at it as a learning experience for you, and think of it in the sense that dental school is kind of like preparing you for a pathway for your own development, not for the school. Like, the school is going to have a good look if it produces 20 graduates in the top 10 of the nation, yes. But as a dentist, for your own self, you want to put yourself in the place where you're going to be in a good state anywhere you go, basically. So that learning, that knowledge, that skill you develop in dental school is going to be something that's going to be with you for the rest of your life. So it's kind of like very important for you to put as much as you can into it. And then back to the equivalency process. The NDCC, like I said, situational judgment. They give you mannequin heads to cavity preps and everything. And then once you pass that, then you also have to attempt the board exam, the national OSCE. So they kind of like give you that this is a computer exam too, and then you just kind of like do that exam. And if you pass it, then you get a national certification. And then after that, you can then approach the province where you're staying or where you intend to practice on the requirements for their own licensure, basically, because every province has its own different regulation for their own license. And just like in the US, every state is different. And Canada also has the same thing. Every province has its own licensing requirement. The other pathway is kind of like very similar to the school route you have in the US. So first off, you do your credentialing, and then you take the AFK, and then use that score to apply to dental school. That was been for the longest time, that has been the route to do it. In recent years, a lot of schools have also started accepting the ADAT exam as a requirement in lieu of the AFK or both. So you can do that, the AFK and or the ADAT exam, and then use those results from those two exams to apply to dental school. And then depending on the school you get into, you can then attend a 2 or 3 year DMD or a DDS advanced standing program, after which you then do the virtual OSCE, and then you apply for a provincial license after getting your national certification. That said, when you get into dentistry and when you come into North America, from as a dentist from Nigeria, it's always hard to break back into dentistry. So there are other roles you can consider prior to you getting recertified in dentistry. I know a couple of weeks back you've had about clinical research, so that's on that route you can also go through too. But there are, in terms of dental specific routes, you can also have dental therapy. They require dental therapy and dental hygiene require some further education and training, but they are remunerated just as well too. So I've had friends and people who have gone into it and are happy to do it and keep doing it because they love it too. Dental assisting is also something that's people do a lot. I did that for a couple years before I went back to dental school. So dental assisting is kind of like, I find it was an easier, less expensive route to do. So that's something to also consider. It's kind of like the equivalent of your dental nurse in Nigeria, because we don't have nurses here, but we have assistants, and their roles are kind of like a bit broader. And but that's kind of like a role to also get into. You also have dental administrator or sometimes receptions. They kind of like are I didn't want to say reception because kind of like the Nigerian connotation for reception kind of like makes you feel like a front desk officer, stuff like that. But the dental admin role takes more than that. You have to deal with more stuff. You have to deal with insurance, because something that's rife in North America is like there's a lot of insurance here, either the government insurance or private insurance. So your dental office has to have knowledge of that insurance and how the billing works, and when to bill, when not to bill, stuff like that. And that's not the purview of the assistant or the doctor himself, basically. So the dental administrator does a lot more than just like making calls. And also, I find that people who have dental knowledge who go to dental admin, tend to be, a bit, very, very useful to the practice, because they have a dental knowledge. So a patient calls and says, "Oh, I have these symptoms." You're able to like say, "Oh, what are the pain? Is it radiating? Is it, stuff like that." And that actually makes foreign trained dentists actually very valuable to a lot of practices. A lot of practices here, foreign trained dentists, and they kind of like want to, get you into a role somehow, because they feel that patients can really catch on to things faster than people who have no dental knowledge. So that's one way. You also have a treatment planning coordinator. So some offices would employ a treatment planning coordinator, because the dentist usually will be the one to like treatment plan and make, this patient has 20 cavities, which is more urgent, and make an itinerary of let's do teeth number 36 first, or whatever it is. But because of the way the clinic is structured here in North America, there's a lot more focus on production for the dentist, of like actual work on the patient. He has little or no time to like sit down and trying to say, let's do this one first, let's do this one first. So some offices would have a treatment planning coordinator who actually goes behind the scene and does all this. Then, during a meeting time with the dentist, they sit down together and say, I've dropped this plan, this is what I think we should do. And then the dentist says, I approve the plan. And then this person can then call the patient and say, hey, this is what it's going to cost you. this is what we need to do, and this is how much it's going to cost, and the how the steps that are going to be entailed in the process of getting you the care that you need in terms of your dental care, basically. So that's also something that people can do. And then you have the office manager too. So basically, just like with every office, you always have an overseer, dental office manager too. So like a dental officer, office manager with a previous dental knowledge is also always going to be valuable, because you understand if a patient says, "Oh, my filling came off," you can understand, okay, well, you eating something, or you have pain, or you need an extraction. That kind of knowledge that you've gained from dental school is always going to be valuable for you all through anywhere you decide to go to, be it North America, be it Europe, or anywhere. It's going to be very, very, very valuable. So always keep in mind, like I said earlier, that the learning you're getting now is also always going to be something you're going to really, really be happy with, down the line. So that's it. A couple of people asked about internships for dental school, because I personally did attend an internship at King's College back in 2012, I think. So a lot of schools in Canada and the US are open to the opportunities for internship. I also remember back then, before I went to King's College, I also applied to go to British Columbia. I didn't get it, but I know friends who actually got to go to University of British Columbia for an internship. But what I would just say is, people like, the Office of Student Services is your best contact. So go into the website and research schools, the dental schools, Office of Dental Student Services. Find your email, find a contact person in there, send in your request, and then they will kind of like, every school is going to be different. They will send you the requirements. Some of them will require your dean's letter and some application forms that you have to fill. But then you can do that, send it to them, and then of course you also have to process the visa and stuff like that. So always keep in mind and give yourself enough time for processing for your applications for visa. I know my school did a lot of exchange programs and externships for people over the last 2 years that I've been there, and I think it's something they do often. It's just that you just have to like reach out to them and find out what exactly the requirements or everybody needs for their program. That said, just to put it in there, that like Dumbledore would say, it's our choices that show what we truly are. So whatever your choice is, whether you want to stay in Nigeria or you want to go to North America, those choices are very important for you to do, and making sure that you do a good research about it before you actually put in the work and do the movement is always very important. So having to be able to practice dentistry is going to be easy for everybody eventually, but those choices you're going to have to make, whether to go into dental school, whether to take the licensing exam, those are far and more important than actually the dentistry that we're going to actually do eventually. And always ask for help. Like I always say that Yoruba will say, somebody who asks for the road never misses his road, right? So always ask for help whenever you feel like you need something, you're not sure, reach out to somebody, ask for help as much as you can, because that's the only way that you can actually get all the information you need. So that said, I'm just going to do a brief talk on the practice models in dentistry in the US and Canada, and then we can then call it a day and open up for Q&As for us to do. So in terms of models of practices in the US and Canada, they're very similar in terms of the models of general practice that they have. And there are a few differences here and there, but for the most part, they're very, very similar. And the main two that you would have are the dentist owned. So just like a lot of what we have in Nigeria, private clinics. Basically, we have a lot of private clinics. Either it's a multi-location private clinic, like Nigeria, we have a couple of people who have in different locations. So you have people with only one location, or you have people with multiple locations across board. And it's owned by either a sole proprietor or a couple dentists coming together to open up a practice. But because it's owned by the dentists themselves, then it's also called a dental operated group practice, basically. And then the second major one you have in North America, in US and Canada predominantly, is what we call the dental management organization group practice. So basically what this happens in this one is kind of like a partnership kind of program, a model. So there's kind of like a dentist who partners with a corporate body, so the corporate body is in charge of your payroll, your hiring, staffing, all the paperwork, the legal stuff, everything that, and then the dentist who's a partner with that organization is in charge of the staffing of the dentist itself, and in charge of the day-to-day running around of the clinic. So that is in the US. It's very rife. There's a lot of HMOs in there, like, or DSOs as we call them, and then they are very common. In Canada, they're not as common. There are a few of them, but they're not as common as in the US. In the US, so I would say in Canada, there's more of sole proprietors, dental-owned practices. In the US, there's kind of like almost a 40-60 mix of 40 HMOs or DSOs and 60% private practices across the country. But of course, US is a very huge populated country, so there's a lot of people in there. But there are other ones that you can also have too. You also have the government agency ones. You have the non-for-profit. So you have people who are just like NGOs and just kind of like focus on disadvantaged people, refugees and the likes. And that's also something you can have. Then you also have the insurer group providers too. So like insurance companies might have a healthcare system, and they have a couple of dental clinics attached to those healthcare system that actually gives out gives out dental services in there basically. And then you also have the government clinics too. So there are not a lot of government clinics, but there are a couple of them. We call them federal qualified health centers in the US. And then you kind of like go in there. There are low income places that people can go. Their charges are much more reduced than in what you will see in private practice. And that's kind of like how basically a lot of the models actually work across board in the US. So the main ones are private practices or partnership with corporate bodies, and then other smaller ones that you can also have. And then what is your role as a dentist, as a general dentist, as a dentist generally in terms of like what you can do? So another pathway to actually getting licensure in Canada and the US is also the specialty pathway. So if you were a specialist back in Nigeria, for example, you finish your residency, you're an oral surgeon or you're oral pathologist, you can actually take a qualifying exam for specialists, and then you can actually come in and also practice as a specialist. They kind of like give you a limited license to only work within that field. So if you were a surgeon and you pass the exam, then you can only have a scope of practice within just that specialty field that you actually have. But for the most part, most people are associates on your left-hand side there. So you're kind of like the general dentist you have in Nigeria too, almost the same thing. Either you work for a certain amount of days, 9 to 4, 8 to 5, whatever it is, or 2 days a week, or 4 days a week, or 3 days a week, doesn't really matter. But you're kind of like, have to just come in. The clinic isn't yours. You just come in, perform your service, and go. And then you can also the associate can be either of two types. You can be an associate as an employee, so like they employ you and you give you benefits, your dental, Apple, Vision, whatever it is, whatever they give to you as benefits. Or you can set up your own corporation and be an employee of your own corporation, and then your corporation is hired by this clinic, and then the clinic then pays your corporation, and then you can pay yourself. It's kind of like a lot of jargons, but a lot of people do it because of tax reasons. Because one thing you find here is it's very regulated, so you can't evade your tax. So if you're getting paid this much, and the government says your tax is this much, you have to remit that tax. Otherwise, you get into trouble with with the tax revenue service. So it's very important to keep that in mind too. And then of course you can be a clinic owner too. You can be a clinic owner, practicing, non-practicing, have your clinic, just do whatever you want in there too. Other things you can do post-graduation, you can go for a residency. So people go into dental schools and be a part-time faculty or a clinical instructor on the floor. So a lot of dental clinics here would employ people who just mentor the students, approve their work, check out their work, make sure it's like up to standard, and things like that. So there are a lot more roles that you can actually get into when you get into dentistry, once you get a degree from here, other than just even whatever it is that you want. So I think I like it because the opportunities are endless. So you can do 1,001 things and you will still be happy and fulfilled in whatever you want.
It can be a lot of things.
Okay, we're about finishing. So I think a lot of people will be interested in how you get paid. and this can vary across clinics and different ownerships. But the main two ways that you actually get paid across the US and Canada is either you get a daily guarantee or a daily rate. So for example, I know a lot of people are used to hearing about you get paid per hour. That's also can happen here. It's not very common for a professional service like dentistry. You don't get a lot of people say, I'll pay you $10 an hour, whatever it is. But people can actually have jobs that actually pay you per hour. But when you get paid per hour, I'm pretty certain that it's in the rate of over $75 to $100 an hour and above per hour that you work. But what you will see more commonly is a daily rate or a daily guarantee. And I see this more common with all the corporate bodies. They kind of like offer you and say, for every day that you come to work, we're going to give you $500 or $600 or $1,000 a day, whatever it is that you negotiate with them, basically. And then you guys can then work it out, the other things, and based on your deductions and your benefits and everything that happens. But the very, very predominant is the fact of you getting a daily rate or a daily guarantee of how much you get paid per day that you come to work and you see patients. Whether you see patients or you don't see patients, you get paid a certain amount or a certain rate per day. The other more common option that you see in US and Canada is a percentage of your production. So this is more common with private clinics. So because it's kind of like, I can't pay you for what you don't do, right? And it's a private clinic, I have to break even too. So you come into work, you do the work, I pay you a percentage of whatever you work. So if you make $1,000 in a day, I pay you 40% or 30%. So the range basically varies from country to country and from state to state, but the average is between 30% to 40% of your production or collection, basically. And there's a kind of like a difference, it's a slight difference, but don't worry about that for now. So kind of like, just imagine that you come into work, you see 10 fillings, you make $10,000 in that day or in that month, and the clinic agrees to pay you 30% of that or 40% of that, whatever the agreement you guys have. But that's kind of like the two main ways that dentists get paid in Canada and or the US. Then to kind of like bring this to an end, like I said earlier, it's kind of like the big thing that I found personally in terms of like the dental work wasn't the fact that the dentistry was different. Like, in fact, actually, I enjoyed the dentistry so much that, it kind of like, was a breeze for me. Like, I kind of like feel that I, didn't have to do too much when I was in dental school. But that was because I had a good foundation from University of Lagos, basically, where you all are, most of you are. So, don't shy away from doing the work. Do those amalgam fillings, even though we don't do amalgams that much anymore. Do those fillings, do those composite fillings, do everything that you can do. Stainless steel crowns, change those wires, put those modules in there, because those things that you do back there are going to make your life, if you decide to cross over here, even much more easier. Because I was able to focus on electronic health records, because we didn't have that in Nigeria a lot back then. We used to have paper charts, but here there's a lot of electronic records. So I was able to focus on getting myself abreast with the records, with patient management, what to do when patient says what, how to react and stuff like that, and not put too much pressure on myself on learning dentistry, because the foundation that I had was very good. And so for you guys too, it's the same thing. And there's going to be bumps and there's going to be hitches on the road, definitely. Like you can see, I love these two diagrams I put on here. I wasn't sure which one to put, so I put both. So people look at you and say, hey, this guy's a dentist now, but they don't know those loops and those downtimes and depressive moments that you have to go through to actually get to that point. They just think, oh, he left from Nigeria, went to Canada, he's practicing now, and then you don't know what people have actually gone through. And that's how success generally is. There's a lot of persistence in there, sacrifice in there, failure in there, but still there's also a lot of hard work, dedication, discipline to making sure that you achieve that goal. And I think generally what you decide to put your mind into from now is like, don't wait till 5 years from now to decide what you want to do and say, oh, I'll get serious in 5 years when I get to Canada or when I get to the US. That time you need to get serious and get everything perfected actually starts now. So keep that in mind too. And then to summarize and put everything together, there are some questions that came in earlier. I think I've tried to answer most of them in course of the presentation in there. I think the only one I was kind of like going to just kind of like go over and touch base on is the place where it asked about, um, let me see, grades. Yes, so grades. Number two, where it says how important are grades in Nigeria when applying to a school in US or Canada? And the truth of it is, it's very important. It's as important as you can get. So what happens is when you send your grades for credentialing, so to all this EC or West, they kind of like give you a GPA that is standard or at par with what they think you would get here. So more often than not, over a scale of 4 or 5, and they will give you whatever it is. So the better your grades are, the less receipts you're having, the less problems you're having, the better your grades are, because for once they do it, once they have to like see the same course twice in your transcript, they kind of like is some deductions they put in there and stuff like that. So it's always very important for your grades as much as possible to be as high as you can get them. So like I said earlier, the time to be serious is now, not 3 years time. If I could turn back the end of time and change some things back then too, I probably would have, but I couldn't. So if you can at this point in time, it will be awesome for you to actually do that. But that said, what schools in the US and Canada do is they also have a way they actually understand the grading system from different countries. So when they select their candidates, they don't use a one-size-fits-all candidate. So if there is a candidate from, for example, Asia, or specifically maybe from China or from India, they have a certain grades they use for them. So this is what they grade as an average student. So they might say an average student is a 2.5 or a 3.5, and a exceptional student is a 4.5, whatever it's going to be. So they have that, grading criteria for depending on the country that you come from. So, in as much as you should get, to as much as good grades as much as you can, there's also a grading system that all the schools work with depending on where you come from. So keep that in mind too. But, like I said, if your average in Nigeria, for example, is 1.5, you don't want to have a 1.53 or 1.45. You want to be a 2.9 or a 3.5, so they can say, oh, this person is a way above average student, and that can like improves and boosts your chances, exponentially. That said, every other question I believe has been answered in the course of the presentation. So as a final conclusion, dentistry anywhere in the world is very lucrative. It's something that you would love to do, be it in Nigeria or be it out here. And there's so much opportunities that you can have from being a dentist. If you decide you don't even work in dentistry, like I said, you can have many other roles that you can actually get into and do that could actually be also very fulfilling too. And the beauty about everything is kind of like your equipment. You can take lease of your equipment, do it over time, do it over a period of time, your equipment and everything that you have. And then generally, dentistry is just a dream to have in North America, because everything surrounding it, something like remuneration, the lifestyle you would have, and all the things that come with it basically are something to always look forward to. And I'm sure it's the same thing in Nigeria too. It gives you a prestige that is above average. And then as students, as of right now, I think the focus for you will be to get as much knowledge as you can, put your best foot forward, do all you can, and ultimately the sky is, like they say, is always the limit, or the start of the limit, basically. So once again, I thank you guys, ULADS in general, Shayo, and all the executives on there for giving this platform to come in here and address you guys today. Hopefully in the future we can do much more together. And I'm happy and honored to be here, and it was nice sharing my thoughts with you this evening. And we would leave the room open for questions and comments, whatever they may be, and then we'll see how we can answer them as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Akintayo Oguji. We really appreciate your presentation. They were constant, straight to the point, and educative. Yeah, I think it's time for questions. Please, if you have any question, you can send them to the chat box, and I will read them out so that it will be orderly. Yes. However, I'll read out the first question that I have here as well. I also have some questions here as well. I think the question on everyone's mind will be to get back. Actually, most of the states in the United States of America requires you to have a DDS or a DMD. Sir, how were you able to manage to do that since the program is quite? I think everyone knows it's quite expensive. How were you able to? Can you like highlight the steps you take or you took to get into dental assistant, and from there to entering the DDS program from finishing in Nigeria to your dental assistant period to the DDS program. Can you please highlight that for us? Are you able to go through that phase?
Okay. Yeah. Just going to put that down so I don't forget all the questions. So if I get you correctly, you learn about, my own process of how I got from Nigeria to dental school and loans and everything, or payment for dental school and the likes, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's going to be another 1 hour program, but I'll try to summarize it basically. So like I said, I finished dental school in Nigeria in 2012. I did my house job also in Lute, 2013, 2014, went for NYSC following year. And then I got into private practice in Nigeria, and I worked up until January 2019 when my wife and I moved over to Canada. So, I have tasted the waters in Nigeria too, so I know how that feels too. So I moved over to Canada in 2019, and then I started my credentialing process. I actually didn't want to go to the US. I wanted to stay in Canada for the most part because I was like, this is home already. I might as well just stay. But then COVID happened, and things got a bit rowdy. But while I started doing that, while I started doing my processing, my credentialing for my trying to get back into dentistry, I also started applying to the dental assistant programs because they were kind of like, in my opinion, I may be wrong, in my opinion, they were an easier route to get back into dentistry. So one thing I think dental schools like to see in your application also is to see that, when you leave your country as a foreign trained dentist to when you apply into dental school, when you get into dental school, you just didn't, leave dentistry and go into tech for 20 years and then come back and say, hey, I want to come back into dentistry now. They want to see that you're still involved in dentistry as much as you can. So I felt that a cheaper route for me would have been dental assistant, because for dental assistant you can either go back to school. There's a dental assistant school for it, or you can actually just challenge some exams. So in my opinion, with all the knowledge I had from Nigeria, with all the schooling we've done as dentists, I always tell people that is your route if you want to do dental assistant. So I challenged the exams. Part of the first sitting, there's 2 parts for the exam. There's a written part, which I passed at the first sitting, and there's a clinical part, which I also passed at the first sitting. So they kind of like make you do. It was tricky actually because there's some things we don't do in Nigeria a lot. But like I said, the dental nurse you have in Nigeria and the dental assistant you have in Canada have different roles, slightly different roles. So it's kind of like it's more inclusive. Like in dental assistant here, you can put on the rubber dam on the patient. You can do sealants. You can do some some tiny things here and there. So they actually assess you on those. Basically, you have to take X-rays and use the rings and a lot of things. So I go back into doing that, and then once I got my certification, then I actually started applying for jobs. But luckily for me, before I did apply for that, I was also working in a dental clinic doing some dental back office stuff, orderings, sterilization, just kind of like volunteering when I could, basically. So that kind of like helped me once I got my license come true. I kind of like just automatically got a job as a dental assistant in that clinic. And then moving forward, we started doing that. And then my doctor who was there was very supportive and was like, I think you make a great dentist. You should look into it. But I kind of like was confused about it because I was like, I was planning to challenge the exam through the equivalency process because it was kind of cheaper. And dental school, I must tell you, is expensive. Be it in Canada and the US, it is pretty expensive. But he was kind of like, dentistry is lucrative, and if that's what you really love and you want to do, you want to like get back into it and get it as much as you can, as soon as you can. The early time waits for no man. Whether you do it now or you do it in 5 years, you're better off doing it now than in 5 years. So I then started pursuing it, and I started doing the Canada route and the US route, and said, okay, whichever one comes first, we'll see. So did all those credentialing, did all my WES, took all the exams, did my TOEFL. I probably got like 112 or 114 or something very ridiculously high. So like I said, not to brag, but the idea is, like I said, whatever you want to do, you have to always put your best foot forward. Because like when I started writing my resumes, I was telling them I did my dental assistant exam. I got in, I passed at the first sitting. Like, it's not everybody who passes at the first sitting. So when you tell them I passed at the first sitting, they're like, okay, this person knows his onions. He knows what he's doing, right? So you want to be, putting that foot out. So, did all that work, did all the applications, and, when I finally had to choose a school, it was very difficult too, because I had 3 admissions. I got into University of California in Los Angeles. I got into University of Southern California, and I got into the University of Loma Linda. And I was like, okay, what do I do? Where do I go? And I had to start doing, mini mo to try and decide where I'm going to go. But something important also, like I said, for you guys, is also going to be thinking about the cost and where you want to work in eventually too. So the cost of dental education in Canada, the US, would vary from school to school. But averagely, a dental school education for the 2 years, if you decide to go for the advanced standing program, will cost you around $200,000 in tuition, just tuition alone, excluding living expenses and rent and stuff like that. Basically, it will cost you about that. But the thing is, you can always apply for loans. Most people do. Like 75% of people have to take loans to go to dental school. I had to. So some people will work for a couple of years, save some money to buffer up the cost. So rather than have to take the whole amount in loans, you can also substitute with some money that you have saved over time. Other people use family support and stuff like that. But I know it's harder for us as Nigerians, because when I convert $1 million naira to US dollars, probably like $1,000. So I'm like, how does that offset 200,000 in bills? So more often than not, it kind of like you have to take a loan to go to dental school. But when you finish dental school, like I said, just like I said, an average dentist, if you use the daily rate, will make about between $400 and $1,000, at the average a day. So over time, with time and with putting in the hard work and the graft, I think that you'll pay off those loans in good time, and you will still be able to have a comfortable life. So in terms of like my own pathway from Nigeria, over here, that's how I did it. Try to stay in dentistry, and finally go back to school, and then passed all my licensing exams at the first sitting, at the first try, and I've it's kind of like like I said, once you put your best foot forward in everything, it kind of like shows and reflects on you. Like I've talked to people who have talked about job opportunities, and they say, oh, I remember you from this conference. I made sure I was going for conferences when I was here, went for conferences, met people, and I met people, and I was like, oh, I remember you from that conference, and I didn't even remember that person at that conference. So it's important that when you go get into school or wherever you are, even right now, don't just be passive. You have to get in there and get involved, and that's actually how you can actually stay afloat.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering the questions. I think people also left some questions. Someone asked, is there a room for continuing education in masters in various fields in dentistry, like oral biology, prosthetics, for people that like research in North America?
So if I get question, like, is there a role for further
Is there a room?
studies?
Yes, for continuous studies.
Yeah. And so today was just about practice of dentistry itself, but like in terms of other roles, basically, I know last time you guys had the clinical research part. So a lot of people, I've had friends who have said, I don't like clinical dentistry. I don't want to do it. I don't want to like put my hand in people's mouth. I want to either sit in the lab or lecture. So definitely there is that role, or there's that place for that into. So I have had friends who have just pivoted and just kind of like got a master's in public health, or in in public dentistry, public health, dental public health, or in something related to dentistry or the medical field, went for a PhD and are lecturing, basically. So if that's your passion, definitely there's a role for that too. Some people have used that as a stepping stone to get back into clinical dentistry, because like I said, dental schools want to see that you're staying within the confines of a school or abreast of dentistry. So people would go for masters and then use that to apply for dental school. But definitely, if academia is your own kind of priority for you, then it might be not worth it trying to go into dental school. You might as well just tread the path of doing an MPH or doing a Master of Health Administration. There's like a couple of other ones you can do, not just MPH. You can do health administration, you can do biostatistics and epidemiology, and a couple of other things you can actually do in there. And then from there, you can then do a PhD and apply to dental schools as a lecturer. And then a lot of people have MSc in oral biology, and different schools have this kind of thing. So there are a lot more things, opportunities you can do if you don't want to go into actual practicing dentistry, and it might be a lot more less expensive actually.
Thank you very much, sir, for that response. Another question, sir. How is the pay like for the role of dental assistant or dental hygienist? What's the pay like?
Okay, so it's hard to like say. I don't know how you guys relate to it in terms of prices. So like for most roles in North America, Canada, and the US predominantly, most roles you get paid per hour. That's how you actually have an hourly wage. That's actually how most places get paid. So it's kind of like different because dentists, some dentists get paid per hour, but most dentists will get paid either per day or in terms of production. But most other jobs pay you in terms of how many hours you put in. So you probably have to clock in or clock out, whatever it is. But in terms of pay for dental assistant and dental therapy and dental hygiene, whatever it is, it also boils down to your location. So it's hard to say one size fits all for those kind of pay. So it's hard for me to give you a specific figure because it will be not doing justice. For example, if you go to Ontario as a dental hygienist, your starting pay is about $35, maybe $40 an hour. And if you come to somewhere like British Columbia or better, your starting pay is about $55 to $70 thereabout. So there's a lot that goes into wages in North America because you would have to factor in your experience. You have to factor in, your how many hours you're working a day, what you bring to the table, and also your negotiation skills. And you would also have to always negotiate something. So somebody might offer you $10 and you might say no. Like I remember my first dental assistant job. I can't remember what it was. I probably started earning about $21 maybe per hour. And but then I took up some other roles in the clinic. I was doing the orderings. I was doing the phlebotomy in the clinic. And then they bumped up my pay. And then I got my license and I went and requested more pay. Like I said, it's all negotiation because I remember when I got my license finally, I went to my office manager and I said, hey, I have my license now. You guys need to talk to me about revisiting my pay. And they were like, oh, the starting pay for a new graduate is $25. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, but I'm not a new graduate. Even though I have a new license, I have this much experience in dentistry. I've been working here for so long, you don't have to retrain me all over again. So I remember them taking me up from 22 or 23 to like $28 at the time. So like there's a lot that goes into wages basically, and it will depend on where exactly you are, even in the US. So in the US, you're looking at the US for dental assistants, they don't get paid as much as in Canada. But of course, there's also the currency difference too. But then in the US, you have multiple levels of dental assistant. You have the expanded function dental assistant that can do even more. And then every pay is going to depend on what you can do and what the office kind of like is offering. And then of course, your negotiation skills too.
Thank you very much, sir. Another question, sir. What are the requirements to taking a loan for a DDS degree as a foreign trained dentist?
Good question. Another question that that will be hard to say. This is the only way. There are so many different ways and so many different loans available for you to actually take that will determine the requirements. So, but as a rule of thumb, I shouldn't even say that because they're different loans. So more often than not, it will depend on the kind of program you're trying to get into. You're also going to depend. It's also going to depend on how long the program is. It's going to depend on how much exactly you also need, and what you're giving them in terms of collateral. In the sense that, so for example, You might get a private loan that requires you to have no collateral, basically, but it will offer you a higher interest rate. For example, they might say, we'll give you a loan. You want 100,000, we'll give you 50,000, but we'll give you that 50,000 at the rate of 15% per annum, basically. And then you might find on that loan that says, oh, okay, I have a guarantor or a co-signer who's willing to, who is a citizen or something, who's willing to like put pen to paper and say, I'm supporting this person's application. And based off that, they might give you 90,000 after the 100,000 and say, we're giving you 90,000 and we'll give it to you at 7.5% per annum, basically. So it will depend on your status. So if you have like a citizenship or something like that, it will depend on your status. It will depend on how much you're intending to borrow. It depends on if you're going to get a co-signer or not, if you have a collateral to give. A lot of things are going to get involved. But I would say if dental school is your purview on what you want to pursue, and I would say that will be a discussion that you'll have towards when you actually get the admission. And like I said, when there's a will, there's a way, right? So once you get that admission, the way of paying for that school more often than not will come around.
Thank you very much, sir. All right, sir. I think one last question, sir. It's quite an important question for this person. I want to move to Canada as a dental hygienist, but I have imposter syndrome. I don't think I'll be good enough. But how do I deal with that?
Good question. Actually, very good question. Actually, because I think most immigrants at some point in time in their life, kind of like probably suffer from imposter syndrome. Maybe a couple times, maybe once, maybe never, but more often than not, a lot of people suffer from that. So your question is kind of like twofold. So I'm kind of like going to try and break it down into two. Because if you're going to move there as a dental hygienist, that's a separate process. You have to like go back to school, go back to hygiene school, and get a hygiene designation for you to be able to actually be able to practice. Like in Canada, as a general, you have to actually do that. I think for the most part, I don't think there are exams you can challenge. I think in some states in the US, however, there are some exams you can challenge, and if you pass the board, they give you some clinical plats, and then if you pass it, they can give you a limited license to actually practice dental hygiene. But for the most part in Canada, as to my knowledge anyways, you most always have to go back to dental hygiene school to actually get the designation to be able to practice in Canada. So that's part one of your question. Now, how to deal with imposter syndrome? That's just kind of like a matter of how you deal with setbacks personally with yourself. I think for me, I would say I don't suffer from imposter syndrome a lot because, like I said, half the country in Canada or in America, half the country or maybe 1/4 of the country are made up of immigrants. They have the workforce is probably made up of immigrants. So one thing you need to constantly tell yourself is that you belong. I know sometimes you feel, oh, my color of my skin is black and maybe I shouldn't be here. My English isn't, I don't have an accent to speak like a Canadian or whatever it is. That all is just your mind playing games on you. And it's just kind of like normal for us to always think that way. But I think you always have to believe in yourself. That's kind of like, it boils down ultimately to that. Like I said, the training you've had, the successes you've had, the failures you've had, how you've dealt with all those failures and how you've bounced back. I'm not saying that, it will be a rosy affair or it will be easy. I haven't had it easy myself too. I've had setbacks here and there. I've had times where I've said, I think I should go back to Nigeria. I don't think this place is for me. I've told myself that a couple of times too. But every single time that happened, I've looked at myself and said, I came here for a reason. I wanted to be here. This is why I moved here in the first place. And then you have to focus on your dreams. You have to focus on yourself. So dealing with imposter syndrome is not, or having imposter syndrome is not something that's going to not happen. It may happen to you oftentimes, but how you deal with that is actually what is most important. But the most important thing in dealing with that, I think, is actually believing in yourself that you belong, you deserve to be here. You work so hard. Like, I can't imagine myself after spending all this money to go back to school, having to go through a BDS and then a DDS, and somebody says, I'm not good enough to be a dentist. Like, why? Like, what is your criteria for saying that? So, like, you have to have self-confidence in yourself that you deserve to be where you are. And then once you're able to do that, I think like the matter of imposter syndrome will just kind of like something that fades away, like because you would then not have thoughts of am I good enough? Like I said, investing in yourself is the most important thing. Making sure your skills are really good. Like I always thought, like I've had patients like from Nigeria still call me even till today and say, Dr. Ogunji, I need to go somewhere. You're not around anymore. I need to come find you. And I don't think it's because of the best dentists out there. I think it's because of how you treat your patients and the skills that you put on show too. When I was in Nigeria, I practiced in Nigeria, I had patients who followed me across clinics that I moved to. I had a patient who was, she had a wonderful HMO, and my last clinic wasn't taking HMO, but she called me and said, I'll pay for it. I just want to come see you. So the time you take to invest in yourself is not something you should take for granted. It cannot be underestimated. It's something that you have to do. And once you have that confidence to make sure that if somebody wakes me up today, I can do a good job of doing a class 2 or doing a perfect, scaling and polishing or doing a perfect amalgam restoration, or at least close to perfect. And not just doing that, also doing that and also making sure your patients are happy. Like once you have that going for you, I think the kind of like the issue of imposter syndrome will just not come in as often as it will. It will still happen when you have all those setbacks. People talk to you anyhow. You have racist comments here and there. You'll still feel that way, definitely. But then you will have the backing of the fact that that you've put in the work, you're good enough as it is, and then you've put in the work, you spend the time, and you deserve actually to be where you are. Like it's not beans to actually go to dental school or leave your country and come somewhere else and start a new life. So whatever it is, imposter syndrome can be dealt with by just making sure you have believe in yourself, 99.95%.
Thank you very much for that, sir. We really appreciate that answer to the question, sir. One last question, sir, before we call it a day.
No,
Uh,
no,
sorry, Kolo, can you mute your mic,
no.
Mr. Kolo?
Okay, sir.
All right. So, one last question, sir. Why not America? Why did you pick North America? Why not UK or any other European country? Why not America, sir?
Wonderful question. I'm not sure if I have an answer to that though, because I probably still ask myself that question too, oftentimes. I would say maybe because I had friends and family who had moved over here before, and I kind of like did a research into the process and said, I don't mind doing this basically. Like my first instinct when I first left Nigeria was actually to go to the UK. My initial plan was actually to go to the UK. I actually wanted to go to the UK. I started planning to do the ORE1, and I was like looking into it to pay my $800 then, £800 then, to apply for the exam in the UK. That was my first instinct. And I guess ultimately I would say it's probably God's hand, destiny, fate, whatever you want to call it. But I did have family members who were here already, and I had friends who had also moved here. And at the time I started processing Canada, I had a couple of other friends who were doing it at the same time. So it was kind of like we're all just gingering ourselselves, like, Ty, have you done this? Go and do this next. Go and do that next. So it was kind of like we just kind of did it together. But that said, I don't think it kind of like really matters where you go to. Like I have friends who have gone to Europe. I have a friend who's gone to Europe in Portugal, and he's working as a dentist, also a faculty there. And I think it kind of like boils down to what you really want. Like if you have family somewhere, it's also very helpful because there's no place like home. So if you're away from home, if you can get family, like home away from home, definitely helpful. But ultimately, I think it's kind of like a decision you have to do for yourself. But ultimately, you have to do the research too. Like you have to put the research and say, if I move to this country, what are my prospects if I want to become a dentist again in that country? And then, if it doesn't look really good for you, maybe don't do it. But if you say, oh, okay, you do this exam, that exam, look at the reviews of the exams, they're not that terrible, you can survive, then do it. But ultimately, you have to do what is best for you and your family, at whatever time. So I don't know if there's a right answer to why not America, but I think the non-American dental circle is, pretty lucrative. I had a chat in my presentation there that the dentists in North America, US particularly, are one of the highest paid in the world. But what they did not tell you in there is the US dentistry is also one of the highest litigated ones in the world. So a patient can come up and sue you at any point in time. I've had people tell me that in the US, you if you don't get sued once or twice in your professional lifetime as a dentist, you're the luckiest human being in the whole world. So, there's money in there, but there's also, other caveats in there, litigation, patients, and there's a lot of, mindset changes in North America now with sexual harassment and what you can say to patients, what you can say. So all those factors kind of like are things you want to make sure you research and know before you actually make that move, because they all matter.
Thank you very much, sir. We really appreciate all the answers you've given to our questions, and I believe everyone here is living satisfied actually, and it actually inspires something in everyone to go out and research further on which pathway you want to go to. I think someone wants to say something. Dora, you have the mic. You can speak. Dora Oguni. Or Dora, do you want to say anything? Oh, I guess probably she by mistake with the plan. All right, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Sorry to interrupt you, Funsho. You missed out on someone's question in the chat box. I think Joshua Heze. Yes, Joshua Haze's second question. He asked that how expensive is the exams to enter the DDS program?
Okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of like looking at the chat box now too. Let me see if I didn't miss any other one.
And the one on I think getting a co-signer, like your co-signer has to be an American or something.
Okay, that's probably similar questions anyways. So how expensive are the exams to get into the DDS program? It depends on which pathway you're taking. It depends on what country you're trying to focus on, but definitely there's going to be a chunk of money that you have to spend. So for example, like if you decide to take the exam, the equivalency exam in Canada, for example, the registration process, I don't know about now, it may have changed, but back then, the registration process to get your documents sent to when you send your documents to the body to approve you for the exams, then it was $1,250, so it was $1,250 Canadian for the application. That is not inclusive of the money you're going to use to transcript your transcript from Nigeria to the West to get it evaluated. It's about $100 for that. Using that to send to the body, the licensing body, to also have a look. So that's the first part. Then the AFK exam, the first exam used to be between 1,000 and 1,005, somewhere around there for the first exam. And then more often than not in this climb, people tend to attend tutorials, and there's a lot of tutorials going on that's happening. And we've been a couple of colleagues of mine, we've been working together and trying to see if we can put together something so that we can have something cheaper, because when we went through the process, it was kind of like really expensive. So right now we've been thinking about it. It's kind of like in the pipelines right now. It's not been fully activated, but hopefully in the near future we'll get it out there. Try and get a part where we can find a cheaper means for people who are coming to North America who want to certify, and then we can have like ways we can get something cheaper for people to like attend and have all these questions. Have the tutorials given to you at a cheaper price, because those tutorials can be pretty expensive. It can range from $2,000 to $5,000 for a tutorial for each exam. And like I said, there's 3 exams. So if you're paying, even if you pay the barest minimum of $2,000, that's already $6,000 just for the tutorials, basically. And then the next exam is $1,800, between $1,800 and $2,200. And then the next exam is about $4,000 or $6,000, something that way. So the exams itself aren't the worst, in terms of they're still pretty expensive. They will cost you between $10,000 and $50,000 in totality. But all the other extras you're going to have to do, the TOEFL exams, the other ones you're going to have to do in there, you're going to have to figure out what to do. So that's at the cost for having to do the exam for the equivalency in Canada. If you're going to just go into school, you only just have to do the credentialing. You have to do the first exam or the ADAT, which is about the same price I talked about earlier, about between $1,000 and $2,000 thereabout. And then if you want to take tutorials, there's an additional cost for that. And then, of course, if you're going to school, schools then have application exams. Some schools will have bench tests where they're going to bring you in, give you a mannequin head to do some cavities and stuff like that. So there's other stuff you're going to have to still do also too. So in terms of cost, it's going to be hard to quantify how much exactly. It's going to be extensive, and but the good thing is you don't have to pay everything all at once. So it's going to be in bits, and then that makes it kind of like easier to deal with if you have to do it that way. Getting a loan in America is can be tough. Actually, I must say, I have a friend who had to turn down, an admission because she couldn't find a co-signer. So, if you are a green card holder, then it's much easier for you because you can just apply for a federal loan. If you're not a green card holder, then if you want to get a loan in America for dental school, you have to get a co-signer, or you have to take a private loan with a higher interest with no collateral. So that one would be probably easier to get because you have no collateral, but they don't give you as much. So if you needed 100,000 for school, they probably only offer you 40, 50, 60,000 basically. So you still have a sum of 40,000. You have to figure out how you're going to pay it basically. So there's a chunk in there. If you do have a co-signer though, it makes it easier. If your co-signer also has a good credit history, because that's also very important for them. A good credit history for a co-signer would affect the rates that you get. So if you have a good co-signer with a good credit history, you get a good rate. And those ones that have a co-signer are able to then cover the entire cost of your tuition or tuition and living expenses if you choose to take all that together if you have a co-signer. But in terms of how difficult it is to get it, it kind of depends on if you have family and friends or you know people in America who are willing to do it. It's not easy, I must say, but like I said, I always say one step at a time. When you get to that bridge, you cross it. If God has said this is going to be for you, I don't think anybody's going to take it from you. So if you get to that bridge where you get there, you need a co-signer, that's what you need, God will definitely come into your help and provide that co-signer for you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the answers you provided. Yeah, I think now is on a mission to find. We should find a co-signer. All right, so I think someone is raising up their hand. In person of Oluwasolakwe. Do you have a question, Oluwasolakwe?
Yes, thank you. I want to thank the presenter very much for the eye-opening lecture for the young dentists. I'm not a dentist, but I am a retired dental nurse, starting from dental assistant, but as a dental nurse before I retired in the Lagos University Teaching Hospital. So my question is, first question is that is dentistry a 400 procedure like we have in Nigeria, in the North America and the Canada? That's first question. Second question is that is it the same way for dentists, for a dental nurse, a registered dental nurse, a Nigerian registered dental nurse that come to Canada or US to have easy access to do an exam, a licensing exam, and then be integrated into the dentistry workforce system? That's my second question. Thank you.
Okay. So for those who didn't know, that's my mom. So I can see how my family supported me here. So thank you all guys for coming. And like my mom was saying, so my mom and I apparently happened to, it was just like LeBron James and his son trying to play NBA together. So my mom and I happened to be in Lutz at our times overlapped at some point. So my mom, was chief dental nurse in Lutz before she retired. And we're grateful to have her still around. Don't worry, I'm going to open my practice very soon and you can come help me run it. So, but yeah, to answer your questions, I think dentistry is definitely much 400. Even here, like because of my experience in Nigeria, it's even much more important here. Like I remember the clinic I used to work as an assistant in.
Okay.
For every doctor had to have one assistant. It was like, so if you had a clinic that had 5 doctors, there was at least 5 assistants. Every doctor had to have an assistant. It was very important. You wouldn't see a doctor working on the patient without his assistant. And like I said, here the scope of dentistry is also even expanded for the dental assistants too, because there's so much more they can do. So because the dentist is focused on production, or the dental clinic in America is focused on production of how much patients the doctor can see to make so much money, the dental assistants have roles they can do. For example, for a dental assistant, if a doctor finishes cementing the temporary, finish making a crown prep, the dental assistant can actually make the crown. If you have the, so you have, sometimes you have to get a specific module to attach to your license. So like in Canada, you can have, you have a prosthodontic module to attach to your dental assistant license. You can have an orthodontic module. The orthodontic module, you can actually place brackets, put wires and stuff like that. So you can do so much more. So the dentist can actually see more patients because his assistant can actually do more. So before the dentist comes into the patient, the assistant has prepped the tooth, no, not prepped the tooth, like, I mean, like prep the mouth, you know, disinfected, Corexidine, place the rubber down, you know, put the topical jelly in there, and the dentist can come in, anesthetize, you know, and then start the work. So the dental assistant actually in Canada and US is actually even sometimes even much more important than the dentist. That said, the dental hygienist is also very important too. Like I know dental hygienists who patients even love more than they love their dentist because they spend so much time with them. They come in every 3 months or every 4 months for their cleanings and stuff like that. So the dental assistant is a very important part of dentistry in North America. And you kind of like would get people having, like my clinic then we would have 2 extra dental assistants. So one will be a circulating, what in Nigeria we call a circulating nurse. So one is circulating and making sure everybody is getting what item they need. So for example, if I'm working with my doctor already and my doctor needs a probe, or for example, our Explorer falls down and we can't use that again because of infection control, that circulating assistant is going to give us a new one. So I don't have to stand up from here. So once I'm in the mouth of the patient, I'm here to the patient and the procedure is done. So I don't have to stand up from there until we are done with the procedure. So there's another person in the back who's like circulating and giving us all these things. And sometimes we always swap roles. So the next day I might be circulating and then another person is doing that. And then we also have a third person who is helping us turn over the rooms because you need to clean up, when the patient leaves, you need to clean up the room, get the instruments out, set up for the next patient and stuff like that. So you have a third assistant who is jumping in there once the procedure is done to actually get all this started ASAP too. So yeah, 400 dentistry is worldwide, so not just specific to Nigeria. I know a paramount for everywhere. In dental school, though, it's a different ballgame. You might not get an assistant. So except your dental school probably has an assistant program. Like my dental school didn't have an assistant program, so we didn't have a lot of dental assistants to help us. So we had to improvise. So we had to get our classmates to assist us for certain procedures. But also we have something, a new invention. I don't know if you guys have seen. It's called an isolite. So it's kind of like a bite block and a suction attached to your high volume suction together. So we can just put it in our patient's mouth, keeps the mouth open, suctions everything in the mouth, isolates the tongue all in one single, piece. And then, we just kind of like do the work we have to do. So dental school is a bit different, but once you become a fully licensed dentist, you are going to have, 400 dentistry very, 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 very certainly. Now, in terms of how you can actually become a dental assistant when you come over here, I know I touched about it if you were a dentist already. So being a dentist already, you just have to send in your transcripts to the dental assistant body. And the reason why you do that is, like I said earlier, there's 2 pathways to become a dental assistant in Canada. So either you go through school, a dental assistant school, or you challenge the exams. So dental assistant school, anybody can do that. So in fact, from Canada, right out of high school, you can actually go to dental assistant school. So if a dental nurse comes from Nigeria and decides to go to dental assistant school, she doesn't need anything. She just needs a high school, so your O levels, and you're good to go. But if you want to challenge the exams and get your license because you already have some experience from Nigeria, then you need to submit your transcript. You need your transcript because they need to ascertain that you have some particular credits in some particular courses. I'm not sure which courses they look at, but it has to do with like infection control, dental anatomy, those kind of things, to make sure that your knowledge is already at par with the basic standard knowledge that you must have to be able to practice as a dental assistant here. So if a dental nurse from Nigeria is able to have a transcript that is able to show all these different classes or subjects taken with a particular credit they need, then they will just approve them to take the exams. And like I said, the exams, in my opinion, are pretty straightforward. They ask you about, like, I probably have to study for like 2 days before the exam. So like it's kind of like pretty straightforward. They ask you about teeth or about what procedure, and there is actually like textbooks and stuff you can actually read to do that exam too. So in terms of the second question, exams for dental nurses, there is, if they can provide a transcript that shows that they have all the basic requirements, and it's all the same for dentists too. If you're a dentist too, provide that transcript, you have the right requirements and the right credits, then you're allowed to do it. If you don't have it though, some provinces would and go do that course, and then you can come back and challenge the exam. So I did also put my email in the chat box for anybody. That might be one of your best ways to reach me. So if you have more questions after today and you wanted to find out more, like I said, it's hard to give a general overview because a lot of things in terms of where you want to practice are pretty much specific for where you're going to go, what country you're going to go, and even within the country, it depends on what specific provinces or states you want to go to. So, but like I said, that's my email in there. I would do my best as much as I can. If you reach out to me, if you need to reach out to me, shoot me an email, and we can take it from there.
All right, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Akintayo, for entertaining us this evening and presenting to and giving us this insight and knowledge. We really, really appreciate it. And everyone on this call appreciates you for even sparing out of your time to come and present and share your wealth of knowledge with us. We are really, 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 really grateful for that, sir. And I think this is where I hand over the mic to my president, Oluwaseyomi, to conclude for
So
us.
before you go, I'm going to before Shayo speaks, I'm also going to say that just like we always say that community is very important. And one thing I found when I first moved here was that we didn't have a big African or a big Nigerian presence in here, which some other races did have, which might have been advantageous. So in that light, my appeal will be, when you guys get out here, don't give up. Let's build that community, because we have to build that community, because that's the only way we can get more people like you to, students here to come out here, to do what they want to do, to get back into what they want to do even faster. So, like I said, it all boils down to hard work. Put in the graft, get out here if you want to come out here, make networks, talk to people, join this community. Let us together build that community of dentists from Nigeria who have moved to North America and are thriving very well, so that in 5 years or 10 years from now, we will be a force to reckon with, so that hopefully we can people come over here and they already have a base to start with, basically. So keep that in mind when you're going about your day-to-day activities, and don't think beyond the walls of dental school in Nigeria. There's so much more out there, and I'm hoping that a bunch of you from here at least will come join us here in North America and then help us to keep that torch aflame. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, and I know that we will definitely join you, sir, and build the community together. Thank you, sir.
All right. Wow. All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ogunji. Thank you very, very, very much. We are super grateful that you accepted our request and our offer to actually do this. And this was very, very educative and informative. So I just want to take our time to thank everyone who actually tuned in joining the call, the Oguji family, and our friends from other schools, and all ULADS present. So thank you very much for joining in. The webinar series continue next week with next week on, we'll be talking about residency, like doing residency abroad, and we'll also be having one of our alumnus also speak to us on that. So with this, we can call it an evening in Nigeria. Yeah, why for Dr. Ogunji? Do have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you to my family and for everybody who's come out. Thank you for Shayo for putting this together. And for those who don't want to come out here, actually, I was going to say that, so I forgot to mention that, you know, you don't have to come out here. Like, one of my dreams actually is still to come back to Nigeria and give back. I'm going to come here, have a multi-group practice in Nigeria, and, you know, be able to give back to my community somehow. So everybody's not going to come out here to Canada or to North America, but, you know, whatever it is, whatever we find ourselves in, let's just make sure we keep that flag flying, and, make sure we continue to make sure, you know, CMUL and ULADS is, you know, at the very top.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.